God wants you to be happy. I hope you know that. God wants each of you to be happy. Jesus made that clear when He said, as recorded here in the 10th chapter of the Gospel of John, I have come that you might have life and you might have it more abundantly. What I want to do this morning is share with you 6 choices that you need to make and I need to make if we're going to experience the joy and happiness God intends for us. 6 choices you need to make and 6 choices I need to make if we're really going to be happy. First of all, we need to choose to stand strong amidst the imperfections of life. If we really want to be happy, then we must choose to stand strong even when life is imperfect. I don't know if you know the story about Chippy the parakeet or not. And you're going to wonder as I tell this if this is a true story, but let me tell you it's a true story. It appeared several years ago in a paper in Galveston, Texas. Seems there was a woman who had a parakeet named Chippy. And one day she, as she was cleaning the house, decided she would vacuum Chippy's cage. And so she took off the end part of the vacuum cleaner where there was just the metal tube. And she opened Chippy's cage and she put her hand in and pushed Chippy away a little bit. And then she stuck the metal tube into the cage to vacuum the bottom part of the cage. And just as she was doing that, the phone rang. And when the phone rang, as is our normal practice, she turned toward the phone ringing, and when she did, Chippy was sucked into the vacuum cleaner. That's a true story. And so she rushed over to the living room, and she opened the bag, and she took Chippy out, and he was covered naturally in all kinds of dust and dirt. And she rushed into the bathroom, and she turned the faucet on full force, stuck Chippy under it in order to clean all this dust and grime off of him. And then she got, true story, I'm telling you, it's a true story. Then she got a hairdryer, and after watering him, she turned the hairdryer on full force and dried him. Well, a newspaper reporter some days later learned about this from some people in the community there. And that's how this story appeared in the paper. And he came to see her, and he said, well, how is Chippy doing? And she said, I don't know. He doesn't sing anymore. He just, naturally, he just sits and stares. He doesn't sing anymore. He just sits and stares. Let me tell you something. I know people like that. I know people who, when life hits them full force, capitulate to the harshness of life. I know people who let life's great disappointments and heartaches overwhelm them. I know people who, when life is unfair and imperfect, give into a sense of despair. I know people who, when life slaps you in the face, allow those setbacks to paralyze you emotionally and spiritually. We have a choice how we handle the difficulties of life. It's trite, but it's true. You may not can control the circumstances of your life, but you control the attitude with which you face those circumstances. Let me illustrate that. I don't know if you're a tennis player or not, or like tennis, but I think everyone here knows the U.S. Open was played just a week or so ago in Flushing Meadows, New York, at the Billie Jean King Tennis Center. And it on September the 10th with Andy Murray winning the men's single title, the first Briton to win it in 76 years, a remarkable, remarkable tournament. But if you know anything about tennis and you know anything about the U.S. Open, you know that most of the main matches are played on the Arthur Ashe tennis court, the Arthur Ashe Stadium. Well, watching that tournament or some of it and hearing about Arthur Ashe reminded me of that great athlete. I've mentioned him before in some of my weekday ponderings, but I want to say more about him this morning. You know Arthur Ashe's story, don't you? You know that at age 36, he was found to have a cardiovascular disease and had open heart surgery at age 36, 1979. 4 years later, in 1983, he had another open heart surgery. And then he learned a short time after that surgery in 1983 that from a blood transfusion he had received in the second surgery that he had AIDS. So in his around 40 years of age, Arthur Ashe discovers that he has AIDS, and he knows that he's dying. He wrote a book, which I've mentioned in my weekday ponderings, called Days of Glory. Now listen to what Arthur Ashe has to say about facing the difficulties of life. I am a fortunate, blessed man. Now, this is a man with AIDS. This is a man who's got a heart disease. And he says, I am a fortunate, blessed man. Aside from AIDS and heart disease, I have no problems. My stepmother, about whom I care deeply, both for my sake and for my dead father's, is in fine health. My wife is in fine health. My daughter radiates vitality. I have loving friends in abundance. I have the support of skilled doctors and nurses. I need nothing that money can buy. So why should I complain? And beyond them, I have God to help me. I mean, that is a remarkable statement. Aside from AIDS and heart disease, I have no problems. Friends, it's a choice. You don't control the circumstances of your life, but you do choose the attitude and the perspective with which you face those circumstances. And those who are happiest are those who choose with God's help to stand strong whatever life brings. Second choice I think you and I need to make is this: choose to make time for personal renewal. Choose to make time for personal renewal. I've also mentioned in my weekday ponderings the name Richard Carlson. Richard Carlson was a noted author who wrote several books. The most memorable was the one called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. You may remember that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Well, sadly, Richard Carlson died in 2006, but he wrote several good books, and he also wrote several articles. In one of those articles, he talked about our hurried and harried lifestyles. And listen to this. This is very revealing about you and me. There are 1,440 minutes in a day. If you assume roughly 8 hours are taken up in sleep, that leaves most of us just under 1,000 minutes of waking time each day. It's unbelievable what most of us cram into those 1,000 minutes. There's radio, television, newspapers, and computers. There's voicemail, running around, driving in traffic, and of course work. There are children, along with all the responsibilities and commitments that come with them. There are social and civic responsibilities. There's homework. There's cooking and cleaning and doing people favors. There are bills to pay, decisions to make, things to remember, and endless chores to perform. The requests and noise come at us from all directions. It's relentless and ongoing, and he sums it up in these revealing words: what most of us need is time from all the madness and the noise. What we all need is some time from the madness and the noise. I don't believe there's a one of you in this sanctuary this morning who would disagree with that assessment. I don't think there's a one of you in this sanctuary this morning who would disagree that in the 1,000 minutes that you and I have, we cram so much that we are constantly hurrying and constantly harried. What you need, what I need, is more time for ourselves. We need time to idle our motors. We need time to renew our spirits and refresh our souls. But you know what our common response is? When somebody says to us, you know, you need to take more time to yourself. What is the common response the average one of us gives? I don't have the time. What you need is more time. I've had people say that to me, and I accept that as a noteworthy reminder. You need to take more time for yourself. The common response of every single one of us, I don't have the time. I don't have the time to take time for myself. That is ridiculous. Because every one of us in this sanctuary, this preacher included, makes time, listen to this, makes time for what matters to us, right? Every single one of us will make time for that which matters to us. And my question to you is, does your personal well-being not matter to you? Does your happiness not matter to you? Does the depth of joy not matter to you or to me? If it matters, then we will make the time to take care of ourselves. Now, there's a corollary truth to that, which is the third choice we make, and that is we choose to make time for special relationships in life. Not only do we choose to make time for ourselves and our own personal renewal, we need to choose to spend more time with the special people in our lives. When I was pastoring in another church several years ago, there was a man in his 50s who came to see me, a member of our congregation. He was a very successful businessman in the community, well respected in the community, one of the most respected figures in all of the community, very involved in civic affairs, very involved in the church. And he came to see me and he said, "Richard, I'm going to tell you something I've learned." that I've realized. Now again, he was in his 50s. He said, I've realized that I blew it. I couldn't believe that. Here was a man, very successful business person, well respected again in the community, very involved in civic affairs, very involved in the life of the church. And he said, I think I've blown it, at least up to this point. Because you see, I neglected the very people who enrich my life the most. My wife, my children, and my grandchildren. In all that I was doing in business and all that I was doing for the good of the community and all that I was doing for the church, I neglected the people who make the greatest difference in my life. My wife, my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. God has placed into your life and God has placed into my life people through whom He can enrich us and empower us and help us. And the benefit of that blessing is proportionate to the time we give them. I asked that man to write a devotional about this and share it with the congregation, and he did. And I'm just going to read you the first part of that devotional. There are a few investments we make in life which bring rich emotional return, like the investment we make in the primary relationships of our lives. Here's a successful businessman, beloved community member, active churchgoer, and he's saying the single greatest investment, and he was a man of investments, that I can make for my well-being is my wife, my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. Fourth choice we make is to be a self-giving person. If you want to be happy, then choose to be a self-giving person. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever met an unhappy, self-giving person? Ever? Let me think about that for a moment. Have you ever met, and I know the answer already, have you ever met an unhappy, self-giving person? You have never met. I've been in ministry for 43 years. I've never met an unhappy, self-giving person. And there's a reason for that. It's a spiritual reason. In the 15th chapter of the Gospel of John, Jesus says that I share my commandments with you, my teachings with you, so that you may know my joy, and my joy may be in you, and your joy may be full. Now let that sink in for a moment. Jesus says, I share my teachings with you, John 15, I share my teachings with you so that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be full. In essence, what Jesus said was, when you are obedient to my teachings, you will know my joy. Is there a one of us this morning that doesn't want to know the joy of Jesus? Honestly. Is there a single person in this sanctuary who doesn't want to know the joy of Jesus? And Jesus says it's really rather simple. Take my teachings. And what were His primary teachings? Loving others, sharing with others, being compassionate toward others, being kind toward others, and you will know my joy. The happiest people alive are those people who give themselves outside themselves. Now, the fifth choice you can make and I can make is to take care of ourselves physically. We need to take care of ourselves physically. Now, please hear me. I'm no fitness guru and I'm no nutrition guru, but I believe that what you do with your body has a proportionate effect on your spirit and on your emotions. You know why? God wired you that way. And God wired me that way. And there are two choices we have about our body. One is exercise and the other is nutrition. We have a choice about how we take care of our bodies. Now, please hear me. I know there are people who are battling physical conditions outside their control. I know there are people who have genetic conditions outside their control. I know there are people who have physical limitations outside their control. But the average one of us here this morning has a choice over whether we exercise or not. You say, you sound like a fitness guru. I'm not. Now, I do get up and walk every morning. I used to run until I got too old. My knees gave out. I walk every morning. And I try to watch what I eat. And I'm no perfect person by any means. But I'll tell you something, and I know you know this is true too. The days that I don't walk are the days I feel the worst. I mean, logic would say if you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you walk a good bit, you're going to be tired when? By 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you get up that early and you walk, and then by 3 o'clock you're going to be psh. And the opposite is true, isn't it? And you know that. Why? Because God created us with endorphins. And God created us physiologically to be wired that physical exercise does good for us, emotionally and spiritually. Mayo Clinic some time ago said there are 6 benefits to exercise. Let me run through them quickly. It obviously controls weight. It combats health conditions and diseases. Exercise improves our mood. It boosts our energy. It promotes better sleep. And it can be fun because it gives you a chance to unwind. And then nutrition. What do we not need? Too much sodium, too much fat, too much sugar. And I'm not preaching to you I'm telling you God wired you that way and God wired me that way. Our joy physically is directly proportionate to how we take care of ourselves. God made us that way. Final choice I would mention to you this morning is choose to trust God's divine presence and help. Choose to receive God's power and God's help, especially in the difficult times of life. I don't know if you're a fan of Johnny Cash or not. I'm not going to take a poll this morning. Don't know if you're a country music fan or not. Every time I say I like a Johnny Cash song, my wife just moans and laments. And I don't like all his music, but there is one song I love that Johnny Cash wrote. You know Johnny Cash's story, of course, don't you? The ups and downs, the good times, the bad times. He wrote a song called I Believe. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. But it goes like this. Nothing worked out when I handled it all on my own. And each time I failed, it made me feel twice as alone. Then I cried, Lord, there must be a sure and easier way, for it just cannot be that a man should lose hope every day. And I came to believe that I needed help to get by. In childlike faith, I gave in and gave Him a try. Then I came to believe in a power much higher than I. I came to believe in a power much higher than I. Friends, there is a power higher than you and a power higher than me that is readily available to help us through the worst times of our lives. But listen, the question isn't, is that power available? The question is, do we appropriate that power? Do we receive that power through Bible study and prayer and worship and Christian fellowship? It's one thing for God to be the power higher than I. It's another thing for me to allow Him to come in and give me that power by my spiritual disciplines. When the Apostle Paul wrote, as I read earlier, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. He had learned a lesson. And that lesson was, I can have a contentment the world cannot bring if I just practice the disciplines to let God infuse my spirit. I hope you will choose every single day to practice the spiritual disciplines through which God will empower you beyond measure. Let me close by telling you something. I read a study just a few days ago that indicated that those who have the proper perspective on life live 7.5 years longer. Those who have the proper perspective on life live 7.5 years longer. It's not about longevity. It's about quality. It's not about you living longer, me living longer. It's about how we live and whether we live in the happiness and joy that God intends. And I say to you this morning, as God also speaks to me, there are 6 choices we must make if we're going to know full happiness and joy in our lives. We must choose to stand strong with God's help in the midst of the difficulties. We must choose to make time for personal renewal. We must choose to make time for those who are dearest to us, our wife, our children, our grandchildren, our friends. We must choose to be self-giving people. And we must make a decision to take care of ourselves physically. and we choose to practice the disciplines through which God can empower us. I hope you make those choices. I know in working on this sermon, God was telling me I need to make these choices. Thanks be to God. Amen.